All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another amazing day here in the, well, not so United States of America. I'm Mark Hayes, joined by Brock Ganellis. We are two men in black with an honest conversation. Brock, good day
Men,
to you, my friend.
two men in black and white, Mark.
And white. Did I leave the white out? Did I
Yeah,
white it out?
I know white America has,
Oh,
they need to get a search party out for us when it comes to like protesting, but
how could I forget you, my friend?
we're here. We'll see if we're here on April 5th.
Right,
Um,
exactly, exactly. So, in the words of Cory Booker, don't let this be another normal day in America. We have action, we have leadership, and we also have a call to action. What are your thoughts on Cory's filibuster?
When I first heard about it last night, I kind of thought it was I kind of just mentally downplayed it. Like, okay, no one's going to pay attention to this. He's going to be going overnight. Does anyone care? Everyone's going to be sleeping, right? Is he really disrupting Senate business, 7 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning? But he's going on all day. I ended up turning it on and watching like 4 to 6 hours of Cory Booker. And clearly, it's hugely impressive. He's laid out the message, common sense arguments. He's hit on every topic, and he's gotten huge social media tracking. I went to C-SPAN, they weren't even covering it.
Right, right.
Online on the internet, right? AP on Blue Sky was covering it. So it became all entirely an online thing. And he's got over what, 100 million likes? I mean, it's
Yeah,
incredible numbers. So he's definitely broken through. He's definitely grabbed the attention. The anti-Trump message has grabbed the attention. I'm really curious now to see how the Mad King responds, because no one's paying attention to him today, and everything being said about him is negative.
right. And he hates when the spotlight is not on him. Um, what I think the most important and the most prescient thing you said was common sense, right? Because we keep trying to break through to MAGA light. And I don't know why we keep doing it, but for some reason we feel the need to. But common sense arguments make the most sense to me. Because if okay, we could argue about the Department of Greed and Evil. I love that billboard that's one of the protests. I just love it. We could argue about Musk. We could argue about Trump and whether or not he's a great businessman. I get people won't, want to see the other side of that coin. But when it comes to common sense, my grandma can't get her Social Security check, right? My wife or my daughter doesn't have access to women's health care. See, that's the thing everybody forgets about is these Planned Parenthood clinics. This is not just abortions. This is where some people go, even white people, for women's health care, right? So we're talking common sense. We're talking about the price of groceries. The Mad King said it was going to come down as soon as the transgender athletes couldn't participate in sports. Hasn't happened. Common sense, right? Stop. The emperor has no clothes. Let's stop pretending this guy knows what he's doing, and let's start calling him out like the fool that he is. It's all about greed. It's all about racism. And I have to keep reminding myself, because every time I come on the show and I say, Brock, they did this. They're taking Jackie Robinson's bio out of the Naval Academy Library. And you say, Mark, it's all Project 22. You've said it to me at least a dozen times. And now that's I'm working with that knowledge, right? It's finally sunken in. And everything they do is based and rooted in racism and greed, or greed and racism. Take your pick. And that's what has me so fired up today. But I'm so excited to see Cory Booker taking a stand as one of, an established member of Congress. Like he's kind of sort of a household name.
Yeah, because he ran for president. So everyone knows who he is, right? Because people have seen him up on debate stages. And most people have a favorable view because he always comes across as an optimistic, nice guy. maybe too optimistic and nice to kind of win presidential primaries, right? He doesn't really
Right.
come necessarily with the carving knife on his competitors. He's like a true statesman. And yeah, I mean, just when Tammy Duckworth was on there, just talking about veterans, right? And it's just so simple. She came out and said, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm one of those suckers and losers," and right. And then Booker was reading things from John McCain, and just gets back to the basics of America, of talking about how is it possible that we're treating the veterans poorly,
Right.
like. Because we have a president that has disdain for it because he didn't have the courage to fight, so he hates them deep down somewhere in his corroded psyche. So therefore, we are treating veterans poorly. So yeah, it was just common sense things along those lines that was a part of Cory Booker's message. Kind of really was a "Who are we as Americans" type of dialogue, which is still going on.
Right.
There's
Right.
so many things to hit.
And Brock, as I get older and as I worked for a Fox property, a Fox News Corp property, we were tasked with interviewing a lot of the right wing politicians and at that time they were still the Republicans, but you did have the Tea Party wing
I was
coming
going to say
in.
with a Tea Party, yeah, Tea Party.
Yeah, you still have the Tea Party faction in there. But I got the opportunity to interview John McCain, and I'm glad you brought his name up because I didn't know what to expect. Right. I always kind of, liked him and respected him from afar from what I had seen on television. But when I finally got to talk to him, Brock, and ask him some honest questions of the day, this must have been, 2007, 2006, right before the presidential election. And and then fast forward to the election when he grabbed the microphone away from the woman and said, "No, Barack Obama's a good man. He's a good American. We just have differing ideas on how we should govern." And I realized at that point that my impression of him was right on and genuine. He respected me as a human being. He shook my hand. He looked directly into my eyes when he spoke to me. He didn't have to he could have come in like some of the other stars that we interviewed and sat down, said, throw the questions at me and given me whatever, canned response he had. But he had a conversation with me. And that's what I remember. I remember the connection. While we may have talked 5 minutes on television, we probably talked for 15 minutes in the studio. And he made a connection and an impression on me, and I was a fan ever since. And so I realized at that point that, there was so much, and I knew this because I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, right? And I had white friends, and that I adored and loved and still love to this day. So you're a prime example. Right. So I realized again, it reaffirmed my belief in that people are people, what my parents always taught me. Jerks and assholes come in all kinds of colors and shapes. Right. But people are people. Give them a chance. And if you give people a chance, you'll find out that we have more in common than divides us. The MAGA wing is choosing to be divisive, right? Because they can't even look at facts and discern them in an honest broker.
And stoking the division and that's where Fox comes into play, like, playing on, and social media, that anger is a more powerful emotion and that drives more clicks and it drives more dollars and it's actually become like an industry, the industry of anger. And,
Yep. Yeah, and it's sad. Because ultimately it was what drove me away from the industry. And I think you and I talked about that before. But, in 2016, when people would see me out on the street and say, "Mark, yo, what's up with the Trump rallies at dinner time?" I'm like, "Yo, man, I can't make that call.
yeah, yeah.
That's a call that comes from on high, from
Yeah,
upstairs,
upstairs, what's going to
from
be
New
talked
York." Right? Because
about.
that's how we're making our money, right? Especially if the other two stations have it on or the other three stations are airing it, right? We know the cable stations have it on and
Yeah.
we're competing, and it's all about the competition so you can charge higher advertising
Yeah,
rates.
It's the
right?
news. It becomes the news. It's self-fulfilling also.
Exactly.
I mean, but Cory broke through. Okay, Cory, it's interesting to see what I assume he's going to go maybe 24 hours and then like call it
Yeah,
a day. Like that
right.
that that to me now maybe makes sense. He's decided to go for 24 because I don't know what the point of like trying to go 30 into 2, 3 in the morning would be.
Right.
'Cause he really made his point and made his mark, but maybe he wants to go past the news hour so that it's
Right.
talked about at 6 o'clock and whatever, and that cable news goes 24 hours, but maybe, there's a thought process. Let's finish the news cycle so that it gets talked about in the main networks. I
Right.
think that's worked. I'm good. So I'm happy. So look, Cory checked a bunch of boxes today under leadership and messaging and really
Yes.
his action, but he really gave a call to action. Now, like he didn't specifically say we need to see people out on the streets this weekend in huge numbers to back up, my verbiage with, bodies and
Right.
energy, but it seemed implied to me. So I thought it was good timing as we head towards April 5th.
Sure.
Just a couple other tidbits of things that came up. I'll give you another piece of good news. I tried to sign up to Phone Bank for the Wisconsin judicial case last night,
Right.
which is a vote today. Because I
Yeah.
got email from I think Indivisible. Someone emailed me. I was like, all right, I'll bang the phones and try to drag some people out to vote. And
Right.
it was oversubscribed. I couldn't even get into the Zoom call to get the training to be one of the
One of the phone bankers.
phone bankers. And then they got back to me. It was an hour later. They were going to do a second one, and I didn't see it in time. But anyway, I mean, I was like, wow, that's a good sign
Great sign.
that quickly so many people had volunteered to phone bank. Hopefully that carries through to how many people show up at the polls, that it's a high turnout election, right? We need high turnout elections in all three of the
Elections. Yeah.
the elections today. I guess that was a little bit, that felt good when it happened. I was like, oh, no, I guess I was off the hook, so to speak.
Right. Right. Right.
Phone banking's really funny. Boy, you get to talk to Americans, right?
Exactly.
I always wonder who picks up the phone when they see a number they don't recognize, but people do. And
Yeah.
you get into some really interesting conversations. So I was
And if
looking
you-
forward
yeah.
to some Midwestern conversations that I don't get over here in the Northeast. But I didn't hit my button quick enough. It was oversold real quick. It was like Taylor Swift tickets hitting town.
Right. But that's a good thing. That's a great thing because we need the energy, we need the inspiration, we need people to get to the ballot box because this is our democracy. And remember, as we've been saying and seeing in these town halls, and I was heartened, last night to see there were so many town halls over the weekend. So much video, so many people just getting out. We had a die-in New York City at the Tesla dealership. Did you see that? Where people bought tombstones and laid on that corner and just shut that city block down. And it was a beautiful thing to see. And, so the brand is dead, right? The Tesla brand is dead. Now we've got to figure out a way to keep our democracy from dying, right? I guess it's because of all the doji cuts that Musk is the number one villain and the popular enemy, more so than Trump. Because even though Trump has said go wild, as he told RFK, who's by the way firing people today in our various health systems. Yeah, I mean Trump is the guy who orchestrated all this, right? When Elon wrote him the check and bought the presidency from him.
Yeah, I mean, Elon will have to take the bullets first. He's out in front of Trump. Trump's still a little insulated. I did see a Vanity Fair article today that Trump's approval rating started at 48%, like day one inauguration, then that 46, and now it worked its way down to 44, maybe 43. Someone could correct me on the exact numbers. And I was like, okay, directionally positive. But then I was like, wow, 42% of America still approves
Right.
what is going on in this first 70 days or so. And then that
Right.
got me thinking, if it's 42% of America, that means by math, that means the majority of white people have to still approve. Because you can bet that the Black Latino will push it the other direction. So that means white America is still I wish the poll had just done white America. I'd be curious what the numbers would have been. But it looks like just doing some quick math, it almost has to be still more than 50% of white America approves of what Trump is doing so far for 70 days. That's with the stock market down 10%. That's with the government getting cut left and right. That's with vets getting screwed. That's with people getting pulled off the streets, thrown in vans, sent to Gitmo and then to El Salvador. That's with farmers going bankrupt, right? That's with like the, measles,
Right. That's after January 6th, after
and
January 6th, after the pardons, after bodily autonomy is taken away, after disaster after disaster,
the
they're
number.
still with him.
Yeah, so the numbers are going directionally positive, but like, wow, I was like, that's kind of depressing to see that number. The article was positioned as like a Trump's losing his influence, but I'm like, wow, the fucking guy still has, way too many people that think he's doing a good job, which is why the numbers of the protests have to be huge to show that it's even bigger numbers on the other side.
Yeah.
I've been starting to call it. I think maybe we said this the other day. Is like it's the complacent American, right? So maybe I'm worried about the complacent American. The complacent American is mostly a white person, but we have learned that maybe we don't call it complacent. There's the disillusioned black person
Right.
combined with the complacent white person, and that's what maybe is holding the numbers back a little bit, and why there hasn't been even more waves of outrage, because there's still people that don't feel like they've been affected yet, and or they can do anything about it.
Yeah.
And maybe we just have to be patient. I'm just not patient because I just see democracy slipping away every day. So I
Right.
don't have time. I don't feel that there's time for people to come around.
Right. That's a good point. Did you happen to see Justin Pearson and his wow, I can only describe it as outrage on the Tennessee State House floor? Yeah, he was chastised for attending the funeral of his brother who had taken his life by suicide on the House floor just a few days ago. And I happened to catch a Tennessee Holler article today and piece of video where Justin Pearson was just enraged and incensed. And then I flicked over and I kept searching I went down the YouTube rabbit hole while you were watching Cory Booker, and I saw some of the commentary on Roland Martin's show. And so your point about the disillusioned and disaffected African American is spot on, because that's pretty much what they were saying. And they were also saying, look, don't F with black people right now, right? Because black people are furious, that you and it was, of course, veiled racism, where the White House member, Mr. Farmer, I believe his name was, one of the state senators, said, we've been here doing the work, the hard work, as to imply that Mr. Pearson had not been doing any work. And Mr. Pearson told him, I've been in my community. I've been at my nephew's schools to make sure their kids were okay. I've been at, my community centers, standing and talking to people who may not like me. And he went down the list of things he'd been doing. And then he went after the man, Mr. Farmer, at the end of the session because he was still heated. And, I saw absolutely no problem with it, right? And probably would have done the same if I'm physically able to get to him. Because we see Donald Trump and his cronies continuously thumbing their nose at the rule of law, thumbing their nose at the criminal justice system, thumbing their nose at the legal profession, telling attorneys, you can't work for this kind of client. We want you to do 100 million in pro bono for these kinds of clients, right? So remember now, Brock, these big firms, these big prestigious Washington, D.C. law firms are the very same firms that fight for civil rights, right? That fight for the injustice, that fight for the most vulnerable Americans out here. And now Donald Trump wants to tell them who they can and can't fight for, right? Because he wants them to fight for Rudy Giuliani and the Proud Boys, right? And the three percenters and the lunatics who stormed, the Capitol on January 6th. It makes no sense, right? And black people are tired of white America saying, hey, well, just don't commit crimes. Hey, just don't do. Why didn't you comply? Right. This is the boiling over of George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Khalif Browder, Sandra Bland, right? All those African, going back to Abner Louima. You remember Abner Louima, Amadou Diallo, right? Those African Americans in New York City, right? Eric Garner, right? All those African Americans murdered by police and never got justice, right? But when an African American man goes to the justice system and becomes a part of it, he gets a sentence that is usually 20-25% longer than his white counterparts. So black America is tired of watching this, right? Because most of us have somebody that may have been impacted by the justice system, or we know somebody, right? Not that we can relate, in the words of Stephen A. Smith, that moron. But I mean, when I look at my son, right? He went to prison. He was sentenced to 20 years. And now he needed to pay for what he did. He was caught red-handed. I understand that. But there are plenty of other souls out there sitting in prison or who did not survive prison that may have been sent in there unjustly. And
Well,
that's the problem.
if I can jump in,
Sure.
maybe the message to the disaffected black community, we might have to get Ash back in here to bounce this one off her as well, is the pendulum swings, right? So now that the pendulum has swung so far to the right, to the point of where it's, at least bothered white America, maybe not inspired white America yet, has angered sections of white America, right?
Right.
The MAGAs who have gotten screwed when they thought it was always supposed to be the others, right? But maybe some self-recognition of how it is to be othered and how easy it is to get screwed when the hand of the government comes down, the hammer comes down on top of you, is that when the pendulum swings this far right, it at least has been an eye-opener to everybody, because the racism has been so blatant and is like basically embedded in Project 2025, that maybe if we fight a hard fight, aggressive fight, may end up being an ugly and violent fight, and win, so to speak, right? April 5th, protest overwhelm, and there's a sense that, wow, America got to the brink, but now things have to change, that the pendulum will swing back further. And when we go to repair America, it'll be repaired with eyes further open, because so many people have felt othered, that will come back and will fix some of the systematic racism, the systematic gender inequality, right? The systematic xenophobia, the systematic, suppression of LGBTQ people, and maybe we'll actually come out of it fairer only if we win. And maybe that's the message that can get to the black community, to be like, hey, in this fight, there's going to be more white people out there with you.
Right.
If it happens that way.
Right.
If that's true.
If we can get white America to acknowledge some of those issues. A lot of white America, Brock, let's face it, doesn't want to believe that there is systemic racism, because they believe they're not racist. Right. And they believe if they're part of the system and there is systemic racism, it reflects badly on them. And they don't want to feel bad about themselves, right? So we have to think, like, what has to occur for, like, our friends that you were with on Sunday watching the game? Like, what has to occur to move, some of the guys I played football with at Waldo Panis, right? Like, what is the breaking point for white America to say, okay, there is value in our diversity? Because, look, corporate America knows it, right? Corporate America knows that there is value in diversity, and those are the best performing companies.
Yeah, well, and they know they want it in their customer base, even if sometimes they don't want it necessarily in their boardroom or their
Right.
C-suite, right? They know
Right.
they need it in their customer base. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we've hit on it yet. That's where, Cory Booker talking for 24 hours, hitting on a lot of topics. You just hope that he hits one that connects with
Moves.
people,
Right.
It's like I know what connects with Jewish people. When they see a Latino person get accosted in the street by a bunch of masked Gestapo-like police who
Right.
are unmarked and unnamed, and people get thrown in vans and carted away to unknown locations, right?
Yep.
That hits Jewish people at home, right? Because that's Nazi-like.
Right.
That's the trains out to the incinerators like.
Right.
Round people up because of who they look like and who they are. So those scenes
Right.
bother, that rile up Jewish people, right? Not that Jewish people weren't pretty much already there. Like Ash said, what was it? 88% of Jewish women voted for Kamala. And I think the overall number was like 85 of Jews voted for Kamala. So they're mostly on
Right.
the left. So so now we're going to need, things that resonate with others,
Yeah.
in the complacent majority. Not sure, I'm not sure yet what it's gonna, what it's gonna be. What bothers people the most, right? The George Floyd thing was a videotaped murder, right?
Mhm.
It was visceral. People
Right.
getting pulled off the street into the backs of vans is kind of visceral also. It just looks like, oh shit, that's going on in the streets of like our country.
Right.
That was going
Right.
on in New York City when I was like, cruising around buying a bagel and a coffee from the guy in the corner, like half a block down from me, someone was getting thrown into the back of a van by a masked like ICE agent. Like that doesn't feel right. So I don't know, maybe the protest. That's why I want the protest to happen. And I literally, I'm from the camp where I get pissed when I see people saying, "Oh, make sure it's nonviolent." Yes, it's got to be. We don't want Trump to call in the military or call in martial law. We don't want him to do that. And I'm like, bring it on. I want him to
Right.
call martial law. I know that's going to have negative consequences, but that's going to scare the shit out of everyone in America.
You're
And that's
right.
rock the complacent majority. They're going to be like, "What? Martial law? I'm living in a military state now? What the fuck?" Right?
Right.
So I want to
That's about
induce that kind of shock to America. That's why I want these protests to be intimidating. And
and
I
that
want
makes sense.
I want to force Trump's hand. I want him to do like he did with that thing with Millie, with the church, with the upside down Bible, when
Yeah.
they tear gassed people randomly in the street, right? Because it just made him look like a fucking autocratic asshole. So I want him to look like that because people will see it on TV. And I think that is what pushes the complacent white majority.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you there because he's going to react to big numbers, right? These fractured protests in different states, if we could bring them all together, right, and shut down the Capitol like we've talked about, and hopefully we will on Saturday. Hopefully people are packing bags, and I wish I could go. But you're right, Brock. I have a different relationship with the Jewish people. Not because I paid attention in high school and middle school and was required to do reading on my own by my own parents, right? I actually visited a concentration camp. I actually have been to Dachau and seen the enormity of it. So it gave me a whole different perspective, an entirely different understanding of, the Jewish experience and the evil that was perpetrated on them. Because Brock, you couldn't see from one end of the concentration camp to the other. It was that big. They still had the glass encased lockers of the prisoners, and you saw just the horrific conditions that they were forced to live in. Right now, MAGA doesn't see that because MAGA doesn't travel. MAGA doesn't leave the zip code.
No, they don't see it. But there
They
was
don't
a
see
story.
it.
There was an interesting story, and it's gotten a little bit of traction, but it hasn't gotten bigger. But this kind of hits people who just have families, and they pulled a guy from Maryland by mistake and deported him.
Oh yeah,
in an El Salvador prison. JD Vance was like coming out today and saying, "Oh, now there's nothing we can do about it." I'm like, that's bullshit. You could pick up the phone to the president of El Salvador, or ambassador
And
could
send
call
it
him.
back.
Hey, we need to get this one guy out because he
Right.
shouldn't be there. What do you mean we can't do anything about it? Of course we
Right.
can do about things about it. Save America. Of course we can get that guy out of that El Salvador prison if we had the will. And the administration, amazingly, has admitted they made a mistake, which they
The
never
clerical error. Clerical error happens all the
so
time.
now that it wasn't filmed, unfortunately, but that's the kind of story that breaks through a little bit because people are like, that's like that feels like that's
It's
wrong.
it's cruelty for cruelty's sake.
Yeah.
We can't do anything about it. Hold, even if you couldn't do anything about it, you don't come out and say that to when you're the vice president of the United States of America. This man has a family too. You didn't say that about, the hostages in Israel. We're working on it, right? We were working on it.
Get people out of North Korea over time, but this is like we have a relationship with El Salvador. We're sending people
Right.
down there. They're getting probably making a lot of
They're
money to,
paid. Right.
paid for this shit. Oh, they can't pull one guy out, and then that guy can't be on a plane tomorrow and back with his family by tomorrow night. Of
El
course, he
Salvador
can.
ain't that far.
Donald Trump couldn't pick up the phone and call the president of El Salvador and make that happen. Stop the bullshit, right? So that's the sort of thing I think that riles up some people, or who are looking at that guy as a family man who just got
Right.
caught up in this by mistake, versus I think white America can just be like, oh, the gang members, this and that, they deserve to get shipped out, right? It's easier to maybe justify that shit and look away. But when it's unjustified and the administration's admitted it's unjustified, and now they won't take the effort to fix the error, that just looks like,
Yeah, it's egregious. And Brock, I knew we were going to talk about this. He was granted a withholding of removal order in 2019, and you still grabbed him? This was in 2019. This guy came here the right way. He did the paperwork, right? And ICE accused him of being part of MS-13. What are you talking about?
They just say that on everyone because that's the
Exactly.
standard justification. Every tattoo is
Exactly.
a gang tattoo, right? Every haircut's, again, a piece of clothing, always wearing brown, green clothing. That's the gang color, right? It's just, but there's no one to, we're in an autocracy. Well, what can anyone do?
And remember, we talked about everything being veiled in racism. Stop and frisk, right? Just pulling black people over for the hell of it. You look suspicious. It's like walking through a department. It's like walking through a Walmart and being followed by the security. That's part of the black experience. This is part of the black and brown experience. And that is what makes it even worse, this is the MO. But this story right here, Abrego Garcia, is exactly why we need to pool our resources and come together as one and unify as one.
Yeah, I'm maybe I just haven't heard it and haven't been attuned to it enough, but I haven't, necessarily seen what I would consider to be, proper anger from the Latino community, many of which voted MAGA and felt like, it was good for their business and the like. So, I think it has to start with the politicians and work its way, at least messaging wise, there should be some outrage coming from the people that have a microphone in front of them.
And Brock, what scares me to death right now? I always talk about my grandbabies and I want them to have a better world than we had. And I am scared that my son will get on a plane with his daughter and someone will try to take his daughter because she's too light. Her skin is too light, and maybe mama won't be traveling with them. And that scares the hell out of me because my son could lose his life behind that, because I see him with his daughter. And I know how much he loves her and how unwilling he would be to give her up for any circumstance if someone were to try that. And Brock, that's a very real possibility in this day and age. What the fuck is going on? Like, why do
I
I
mean,
have to worry about that?
it's a little surprising that none of these ice raids have had a violent element yet, that someone had, hasn't ended up in a shootout yet on video, because you come to someone's house, you knock on the door, you're unmarked, you're unmasked, you're unidentified.
Right,
You're going to go into survival mode. And so it hasn't happened yet. It's inevitable. Just like this
right.
mistake was made of sending the wrong guy to El Salvador, it's going to be inevitable that there's going to be an escalation of some of these incidents. I hope it's not, your son's not involved in it, but
Yeah,
there's a number, just the numbers game, right? It's going to,
right.
something is going to turn violent. A little surprised it hasn't happened as yet. That
Yeah.
might shake some people, especially, things that are videoed and filmed, and then it's played all over the news. It's almost like we need the video to get the proper reaction from the
It's,
from the
and see how ironic is it that we're saying that because, in 1991, the video didn't tell us enough when we saw Rodney King. Remember the don't believe your lying eyes. First of all, four men in a Hyundai can never be accused of speeding, especially the early 90s models. It just doesn't happen in a Hyundai back then. The cars are much better now.
It would be different now because no one we would it
Yeah.
would be looked at differently now because we've seen so much, right?
Right.
We've seen
Right.
so much.
Right.
But people don't, with so many shootings, right? No one gets just beat down anymore, right?
Right.
People just get killed. Like
No
the beat
doubt.
down era is over, right? We moved to the
Right.
gunshot
The
era.
murder. Exactly. So
So where do
let's
we go from here tonight? We got the elections. I think we've talked about we
elections.
really want 2 out of 3. A sweep would be
Woo,
incredible.
lovely.
Getting swept would be
Heartbreaking.
demoralizing. Hopefully it could get flipped to, somehow to more energy for Saturday. But it's really going to be interesting to see what the turnout is. How complacent is America? How complacent is America?
Yeah. Wisconsin has answered the bell before, so I think we'll see. I think we'll see a good turnout. So I'm optimistic about Wisconsin. Florida,
It's a heavy
those
lift.
two
Yeah.
districts, that's a heavy lift.
Yeah. They even
We'll
on
see.
the good days, they lose close ones, right?
Right. Right. Just because. And
Yeah.
we don't know, what kind
Who's
of
counting?
fuckery's
We don't know
involved.
who's counting, right? Let's see it.
Might be another hanging Chad situation. We're old enough to remember that. All right, buddy. Another great episode. Great chatting with you. You talked me off the ledge.
Oh, we're not going 24 hours like Cory? Come on. Keep that machine
I
on.
get dressed up for that.
Maybe tomorrow, right? Maybe
Yes, sir.
tomorrow. Okay.
All
All
right,
right. Well,
buddy.
always a pleasure. Thank you.
Same here. See you
Okay.
tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
All right, bud.